The morning sun cut sharp golden angles through the towering glass windows of the Reed estate. The entire mansion, perched atop a manicured hill just outside Austin, was a testament to ultramodern excess. Its walls were mostly transparent, its floors spotless, its furniture curated by European designers. It was a house where even silence seemed polished. Naomi Brooks moved quietly through the kitchen, her steps light, her uniform crisp. Her hands, always gloved in soft pink rubber, even when she wasn't scrubbing, adjusted the settings on the espresso machine. She wasn't allowed to drink from it, of course. The machine alone cost more than her yearly rent. But Liam liked the sound of the grinder. Said it made the house feel awake. "Morning, Mama Nomi," a soft voice called. She turned. Liam Reed stood in the doorway, his oversized pajama shirt dragging at his knees, his hair a halo of golden curls. Naomi's face softened. "Morning, sunshine," she smiled, kneeling to his level. At 6 years old, Liam had already lived a life more documented than most adults. His father, Alexander Reed, was one of America's youngest tech billionaires, the mind behind the world's most successful AI-driven security platform. His name trended on Twitter at least twice a week. His face graced the covers of Forbes, Fast Company, and occasionally, People magazine's hottest CEOs under 40 list. But his parenting style was sterile, efficient, delegated. Naomi, on the other hand, was the warmth in Liam's cold digital world. She was the one who bandaged his scraped knees, who sang off-key lullabies at night, who made dinosaur-shaped pancakes on Sundays. Not his tutors, not his nannies, not even the emotionless AI assistant that monitored his sleep cycles. Just her. She reached out to button the top of his pajama shirt. "How'd you sleep?" He shrugged, leaning into her hands. "Weird dream. You were flying a spaceship." She laughed. "Sounds like something I'd do on my day off." Liam giggled, but then frowned. "My tummy feels funny." Naomi's brow furrowed. "Like butterflies? Or like sick?" "I dunno. Just weird. I feel floaty." She touched his forehead. Warm, maybe too warm. But Liam always ran hot. His pediatrician chalked it up to a high metabolism. Naomi wasn't so sure. "Sit down," she said gently. "Let me get you some water." He obeyed, but slowly. His usually lively chatter was missing. No commentary about aliens, or coding, or Minecraft. Just silence. He sat stiffly, eyes distant. Something was wrong. Naomi filled a glass and turned back just in time to see Liam's body sway. He blinked twice, confused, and then collapsed forward, his head hitting the table with a dull thud. "Liam." Naomi dropped the glass. Water spilled across the tiles as she leapt forward, catching his limp form before he slid to the floor. His lips were pale, his breathing shallow. His skin felt cold, then clammy, then hot all at once. She pressed her fingers to his wrist. The pulse was there, but it was wrong. Too faint, too fast. "Liam, baby, can you hear me?" she whispered. No response. Panic surged, but she shoved it down. Muscle memory kicked in, buried instincts from a former life she no longer spoke of. She laid him flat on the tile floor and tilted his head. Opened his airway. Checked for obstructions. Nothing. She elevated his legs, loosened his shirt collar. Still no response. She bolted to the kitchen phone, hit the emergency line to Alexander's private medical service. Voicemail. She tried the estate's intercom. Dead. Still under maintenance, according to Lucas, the estate manager. She grabbed her cell. 911. The dispatcher's voice was calm, infuriatingly so. "Estimated response time is 14 minutes, ma'am." Naomi's eyes shot back to Liam, still lying on the floor. His tiny chest moved, but barely. His fingers had gone blue. He didn't have 14 minutes. Her gaze flicked toward the front window. There, gleaming like a spaceship under the rising Texas sun, was Alexander Reed's silver Lamborghini Huracan. She wasn't allowed near it. Lucas had said so explicitly. Alexander didn't even let valet staff move it. The car was insured for over $400,000. It had custom leather, hand-stitched in Italy. Naomi once saw Alexander threaten to fire a gardener for accidentally splashing dirt on the wheel. She hesitated. Her heart thundered in her ears. If she touched that car, she could be arrested. If she didn't, Liam might die. She looked down at her hands, still gloved, still shaking. Then she moved. She swept Liam up into her arms. He felt weightless, like a pillow stuffed with fear. She ran, no, flew, through the long marble hallway, her footsteps echoing against the glass walls like alarms. She didn't think. She didn't ask. She just opened the garage, slid into the driver's seat, and strapped Liam beside her. The seat smelled like cologne and money. She had never driven anything newer than her 2004 Camry. This car purred like a living beast. She looked at Liam. His head lolled sideways. No, 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 she whispered. Stay with me, baby. Stay awake. She hit the ignition. The engine roared. The gate sensors recognized the plate. The gates parted like the Red Sea. Naomi drove. Not carefully, not legally, but urgently. She didn't notice the security cameras swiveling to track her. She didn't hear Lucas shouting her name from the second floor. She didn't feel the burn of judgment that would later flood social media feeds nationwide. All she saw was the road. All she felt was the boy next to her. All she thought was one thought, over and over. I won't lose him. Not again. The Lamborghini tore down the open stretch of road, its engine a deep-throated growl that sent birds scattering from nearby power lines. Naomi's fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly the rubber of her gloves creaked under pressure. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the growl of the V10 engine. Speed limit signs blurred past her peripheral vision like falling leaves. She had never driven this fast in her life. Every instinct inside her screamed at the recklessness. The red lights she ran. The stop signs she ignored. The horn blasts behind her. But none of that mattered. Nothing mattered except the boy lying motionless in the passenger seat. Naomi glanced at Liam. His head was tilted slightly to the side, mouth parted. His breath came in shallow, fragile waves. His skin had taken on a pale gray hue, and his eyelids fluttered without focus. Stay with me, baby, she whispered, her voice cracking. We're almost there. I promise. Just a little longer. The city skyline was still miles away. Every second felt like a betrayal. Naomi pressed harder on the gas. Wind whipped past the open top of the car, lifting the edges of her maid's cap. The sun glared off the dashboard. Her gloved hand reached over to gently hold Liam's wrist, checking for warmth. Still warm. Still a pulse. But weakening. As the car sped forward, her mind began to spiral, not just into panic, but into the darker corners of her memory. Places she had sealed off long ago. She saw the fluorescent-lit hallways of St. Clair's Hospital in New Orleans. The place where everything fell apart. She had been 24 then, fresh out of nursing school, working night shifts as a trainee on the pediatric floor. There was a little boy named Milo. 4 years old. Severe asthma. He had a habit of laughing through his wheezes, like nothing in the world could stop him from being joyful. One night, Milo came in struggling to breathe. The attending physician hadn't arrived yet. The senior nurse was in surgery. Naomi had followed protocol, but the delay in intubation cost the boy his life. Milo died, and Naomi was blamed. A review board. A hearing. No lawyer. No money. No voice. They revoked her license. She was marked as incompetent under pressure. No one asked why no one else had been on the floor that night. No one cared about the gaps in staff coverage or the outdated equipment. Naomi remembered standing outside the hospital in the rain after her final shift, holding a trash bag filled with her belongings. She had called her mother, crying. Her mother told her, gently, to come home. But Naomi hadn't. Instead, she ran. She ran away from the hospital, the memories, the career she thought would define her. She became a nanny, then a cleaner, then both. And in time, she found Liam. And now, as he lay dying beside her, Naomi's entire body trembled with the weight of a second chance. Not again. This one, she would save. The freeway began to back up as she neared the city. She swerved off the main route, cutting through a red light, turning into a commercial district, weaving past a truck and narrowly missing a cyclist. The horns were louder now. Some drivers screamed curses at her. Others whipped out their phones to film. She could see them, phones held out through windows, recording her wild drive. To them, she must have looked insane. A black woman in a maid's uniform and rubber gloves, driving a Lamborghini through downtown Austin like she was in a car chase. And in a way, she was. Not from police, but from death itself. Liam gasped suddenly beside her, a sharp, shuddering intake of breath that made her jump. Liam? She called, one hand swerving to touch his cheek. Liam, baby, stay with me. His eyes flickered open, then shut again. A small spasm rippled through his body. Naomi's foot slammed the gas. The hospital was close now, less than 2 miles. But the streets had grown tighter, denser with mid-morning traffic. She flicked the hazard lights on and drove straight onto the shoulder. A police cruiser saw her. Its siren wailed to life. Naomi didn't stop. She didn't even look back. She turned onto the final street towards St. David's Medical Center, tires screeching against asphalt. The engine howled like a beast being pushed to its limit. Naomi spotted the emergency entrance ahead, bright red letters. Trauma Center. Emergency only. She aimed straight for it. But a hospital security officer stepped into her path, waving both hands. "Hey, you can't park here. This is ambulance only." Naomi slammed the brakes. The Lamborghini skidded to a halt in front of the emergency bay, coming to rest across 2 lanes. She threw the door open and leapt out, running to the passenger side. "He's not breathing right," she screamed. "Please, somebody help us." The security guard was still hesitating. "Ma'am, you can't leave this car here." "He's dying," she shrieked. A nurse appeared from the sliding doors, a young woman in blue scrubs with a name tag that read Ava Tran, RN. She took one look at Liam, then shouted over her shoulder. Code red pediatric. "Get a crash team." Without waiting for permission, Ava pushed past the guard and helped Naomi lift Liam from the car. They rushed inside, disappearing through the double doors as hospital staff swarmed around them. Naomi stood at the entrance, her heart threatening to split open. Her hands were shaking. Her gloves were streaked with sweat and dust. That was when she felt the firm grip of a hand on her arm. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am," said a voice. She turned to see a uniformed police officer with his hand on his holster. His face was stern, unreadable. Naomi raised both hands slowly, instinctively. "I didn't steal it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was just trying to save him." "Turn around," the officer said. He began cuffing her wrists. The cold metal clicked into place behind her back. Naomi looked one last time at the double doors, where Liam had been taken. Then she closed her eyes and waited for the consequences. The holding room smelled like bleach and old leather. Naomi sat on a hard bench along the wall, her wrists cuffed in front of her now, but the metal still bit into her skin. The rubber gloves had been removed at intake, leaving her hands bare and damp with sweat. Her maid uniform was stained and wrinkled from the chaos of the morning, more battlefield than workplace attire. She had been silent since arriving. The officers didn't press her. One of them, a younger Hispanic man with a tentative kindness in his eyes, had offered her water. She took it but didn't drink. Her throat felt too tight, her stomach too hollow. Her mind was still with Liam. She didn't know what had happened after the trauma team rushed him away. The hospital staff hadn't told her anything before the police took her into custody. They hadn't even said whether he was breathing again. All she knew was that he had made it inside. That was all she could hope for. The door opened suddenly. Lucas Carter entered, his perfectly pressed suit looking like it had been steamed just for this moment. His tie was straight, his hair slicked back, and his mouth twisted in disapproval. Naomi looked up at him without speaking. He didn't sit. "You have no idea what kind of storm you've brought down on this house," he said coldly. "Alexander is in a board meeting with the general counsel and PR firm. The media's already sniffing around. Security footage has leaked. You're all over Twitter." Naomi blinked. Lucas tossed his phone on the table in front of her. A video played silently, shaky footage from a dash cam. Naomi swerving the Lamborghini through an intersection, horns blaring around her. She looked wild, determined, dangerous. Then another angle, this time from the mansion's exterior security cameras, her running with Liam in her arms, gloves still on, opening the forbidden car. "Your face is everywhere," Lucas hissed. "Every news outlet is calling this a theft. The optics are catastrophic." Naomi swallowed hard. "Is he okay?" Lucas paused. "Liam," she said, her voice cracking. "Did he make it?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. He paced the room instead, his polished shoes clacking on the linoleum floor. Finally, he turned back. "He's in the ICU. They say you got him there just in time." Naomi's head dropped. A slow, silent breath escaped her lips. Not relief, not joy, just release. Like the air from a balloon that had been stretched too far. Lucas crossed his arms. "You could have just called 911. Or called me. Or waited for help." "I did," Naomi said quietly. "I called. No one answered. The intercom was down. Dispatch said 14 minutes. Lucas scoffed. Still, you don't take a man's car. You don't hijack a $500,000 vehicle like it's yours to borrow. Naomi looked up at him again. There was no apology in her eyes. Only exhaustion. I'd do it again, she said. Lucas's jaw clenched. He reached for the phone and turned it off. I'm pressing charges, he said. Alexander will decide what to do, but from a legal standpoint, I'm documenting everything. You broke so many protocols. The door swung open. Alexander Reed walked in. The room changed temperature. He wore his usual uniform, navy suit, no tie, crisp white shirt open at the collar. He moved with the kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without thinking. Behind him were two men, one in a blazer with a tablet, the other with a badge clipped to his belt. Lucas straightened. Sir, leave, Alexander said. Lucas blinked. But Now. Lucas opened his mouth, closed it, then walked out stiffly. Alexander turned to Naomi. For a moment, he just looked at her. Not like an employer. Not like a billionaire. Just a man seeing someone he didn't understand. She looked older than she had that morning. Her face was lined with sweat and worry. Her eyes were red, but dry. Her hands fidgeted slowly in the cuffs. He sat down across from her. The room suddenly quiet again. I saw the security footage, he said. Naomi nodded. I saw you run every light between my house and the hospital. I didn't know what else to do. Alexander leaned forward, elbows on the table. You know I have security clearance on that car. GPS tracking. A full police response protocol. I wasn't thinking about the car. No, he said. You were thinking about Liam. She nodded. Silence stretched between them. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to decipher something unsaid. You've been with us 3 years, he said. Never been late. Never missed a shift. Never stepped out of line. I try not to. He tapped the table lightly with one finger. Why the gloves? Naomi blinked. What? The gloves. You wear them all the time, even when you're not cleaning. What? She hesitated, then answered honestly. I used to be a nurse. Years ago, in New Orleans. I lost a child on my watch. I guess the gloves remind me not to forget, not to get comfortable. Alexander leaned back, surprised. You were a nurse? I was, until they made sure I couldn't be one anymore. Another long pause. Naomi's voice softened. I didn't mean to steal from you, Mr. Reed. I didn't mean to put your name in the news. I just couldn't let another child die. Alexander studied her. You saved my son. Naomi's breath caught. Is he? He's stable. They're running tests. Doctor says it was an acute allergic reaction, some kind of new protein intolerance. No one saw it coming. Naomi exhaled, slow and shaky. He said, if Liam had arrived 5 minutes later, he would have died. Naomi's eyes welled up, but she held it in. Alexander stood. He looked toward the officer in the corner. Take the cuffs off. The officer hesitated. But sir, Now. The officer moved forward and uncuffed her wrists. Naomi rubbed the sore spots absently. Alexander turned back to her. You're not fired. She stared at him. I'm promoting you. Her mouth opened, but no words came. I don't know what that looks like yet, but whatever it is, you've earned it. He stepped toward the door, then paused. There's going to be a press storm. People will want to paint you as a criminal, or a hero, or both. Naomi stood slowly. I'm not either, she said. I'm just someone who didn't want to lose a child. Alexander gave a slight nod. Let's make sure the world knows that. Then he opened the door and walked out, leaving Naomi standing in the silence of the holding room, no longer a maid, no longer invisible, just a woman who had done the impossible and would now have to live in the aftermath of it. The hospital parking lot was flooded with flashing lights and reporters by the time Naomi stepped out of the side entrance with a hospital-issued blanket draped over her shoulders. The early afternoon sun beat down harshly, but the glare of camera flashes was even more blinding. Security guards flanked her, trying to hold back the small crowd of journalists that had gathered like vultures. Microphones were shoved forward. Questions flew at her with machine gun intensity. Naomi, did you really steal the Lamborghini? Were you trying to escape with the child? Do you work for Alexander Reed? Are you a nurse? She kept her eyes on the pavement, face blank, moving forward one slow step at a time. Her hands, now free, were curled into fists at her sides. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The noise was too much. The attention too sudden. She had gone from invisible to infamous in less than 6 hours. Alexander Reed had vanished into another entrance of the hospital with his private team, shielding his presence from the chaos. The official statement hadn't been made yet. And until it was, the public narrative was still up for grabs, and the internet was writing it faster than anyone could contain. Inside the hospital, meanwhile, Liam remained in the pediatric ICU under heavy observation. He had regained consciousness briefly, asked for Naomi, then fallen back asleep. His vitals were stabilizing. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. But for Naomi, no update would ever feel like enough. They let her sit in the lobby while arrangements were being made. A nurse brought her tea. Another handed her a phone charger and a fresh pair of socks. Ava Tran, the nurse who had first responded when Naomi pulled up in the Lamborghini, came by and offered a small, warm smile. "You did everything right," Ava said softly. Naomi looked up at her, searching for judgment, but finding none. "Thank you for breaking the rules," Naomi said. Ava chuckled. "You gave me the courage." It was the first genuine smile Naomi had managed all day. But the peace didn't last. Back at the Reed estate, the chaos was only growing. Lucas Carter was on the phone with legal counsel, spinning damage control. The family's publicist had already drafted 3 possible press releases. One condemning Naomi, one distancing the Reeds from her, and one, tentatively, acknowledging her as a heroic figure. No one knew which one Alexander would approve. In the meantime, social media had taken matters into its own hands. The security footage had leaked fully now, edited and spliced into short, contextless clips. One showed Naomi tearing out of the driveway in the Lamborghini. Another showed her flying through a red light. A third showed her being handcuffed in front of the hospital. The hashtags had begun to trend. Hashtag Maid gone rogue. Hashtag Ferrari felony. Hashtag Reed scandal. Hashtag Lumbo heist. But then something strange began to happen. A different clip surfaced. This one from a bystander's phone. It showed Naomi screaming at a security guard at the hospital entrance, holding Liam's limp body in her arms. Her voice was raw with desperation. "He's dying. Please help him." Then came footage from inside the emergency room, shared anonymously by a nurse, showing the trauma team rushing to save a child. Not a criminal, not a thief, a caregiver. Public opinion began to shift. Podcasts started discussing it. Twitter debates raged between those who saw Naomi as a dangerous, reckless employee and those who called her a modern-day hero who defied class, race, and rules to save a life. Facebook groups launched fundraisers in her name. Comment threads exploded beneath every article about her. She should have waited for help. Would you wait if it were your kid? She broke the law. She saved a child's life. In living rooms across America, people were arguing. In the boardroom of Reed Technologies, the conversation was more measured, but no less tense. Alexander sat at the head of the long glass table, flanked by his top executives, PR advisors, and attorneys. The room was sleek, sterile, silent, until he spoke. "We're not pressing charges," he said. The legal counsel raised an eyebrow. "Sir, technically speaking, this was grand theft auto. The insurance company." "I'll cover the damages," Alexander interrupted. "What about public reaction?" the PR advisor asked. "There's already a divide. Some are calling her a hero. Some think she exploited your son." "She saved my son," Alexander said quietly. "I was in the room when the doctor said she got him here just in time." "That's not spin. That's a fact." The room fell silent again. Alexander glanced at his watch. "She'll be staying on," he added. "And I want a formal press event set up by tomorrow. Not a release. A live statement." "You want to speak directly?" "Yes." A few heads turned, surprised. "Also," Alexander said, standing, "I want the legal team to look into launching a foundation, something focused on emergency response training for domestic workers. We'll name it after her. The Naomi Initiative." He left the room before anyone could argue. Meanwhile, Naomi sat in a temporary office just off the hospital lobby. She had been told someone would come to escort her back to the estate soon. She didn't know what awaited her, praise or punishment. Maybe both. But for now, she stared at a muted television screen mounted in the corner. A news segment was airing. Her name appeared in bold across the bottom. Naomi Brooks, Maid or hero? A split screen showed her mugshot beside a blurry still of her running into the hospital with Liam. Then the anchor said something that made her chest tighten. "According to sources inside St. David's Medical Center, doctors say the child wouldn't have survived the ambulance wait time." They credit Naomi Brooks for his life. She blinked, breathed, and for the first time that day, allowed herself to feel, not fear, not shame, but something close to pride. She hadn't saved Milo. That truth would never change. But she had saved Liam. And now, the world would have to decide what to do with a woman who had done the unthinkable, not for money, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Naomi stood at the edge of the marble foyer in the Reed estate, feeling as though she were walking back into a dream. Only this time, she wasn't sure whether it was the kind you woke up from relieved, or the kind that followed you long after you opened your eyes. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. The crystal chandelier still hung above her like a frozen waterfall. The air still carried the faint scent of citrus polish and imported leather. But now, the walls felt thinner. The house that once seemed like a fortress now pulsed with unease, like it had inhaled sharply and was waiting to exhale. Lucas Carter was the first to greet her, or rather, to appear. He stood near the stairwell, arms folded, mouth tight. He didn't speak, just watched her step inside, as if expecting her to apologize to the walls themselves. Naomi didn't look at him. A junior assistant, someone Naomi had never seen before, led her to a guest room on the east side of the house. It wasn't the staff quarters where she normally stayed. This room had floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the lake, and crisp white linens that had probably never been touched. "You'll stay here for now," the assistant said, avoiding eye contact. "For how long?" Naomi asked. "I'm not sure. Mr. Reed will speak with you in the morning." And with that, she left. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at her hands. The soreness from the cuffs had faded, but the memory of them hadn't. She closed her fingers into her palms and exhaled slowly. She had thought coming back here would bring comfort, familiarity, a sense of returning. Instead, she felt like a stranger in a story that no longer had a script. Downstairs, behind closed doors, Alexander Reed reviewed the final version of the press statement with his media team. The press conference was scheduled for the following morning. It would be live. No pre-recorded message. No teleprompter. Just him, facing the world, standing beside the woman who had become a national controversy in less than 24 hours. "I want the message to be clear," Alexander said, adjusting his cufflinks. "This isn't about saving face. It's about setting the record straight." One advisor leaned forward. "Sir, I understand the emotional component, but you have to consider the precedent. If you condone what she did, you're telling employees everywhere that it's okay to break protocol." Alexander looked at him, unimpressed. "And if I don't? I'm telling them that human life is less valuable than a car." The room fell silent. Meanwhile, upstairs, Naomi sat at the window, watching the ripples on the lake below. Her phone vibrated. A text. "Unknown number. I believe you. I'm so sorry you went through this. I wish I had spoken up back then." She stared at it. There was no name, but she knew exactly who it was from. It had been years since anyone from St. Clair's Hospital had contacted her. The message was brief. No explanation. No closure. But it was something. A ghost from her past, flickering into existence just long enough to remind her that the truth, though buried, had never really died. She didn't reply. The next morning, she was up before dawn. Her uniform had been replaced. A new outfit lay folded on the bed. A modest navy blue dress, a black blazer, and simple flats. No gloves. For the first time in years, Naomi's hands were bare. A driver picked her up and took her to the hospital where the press event was to be held. It was a cool, overcast day. The sky hung low with the threat of rain. Reporters lined the sidewalks, kept back by metal barricades and security staff. Protesters had begun to appear as well, some holding signs that read, "Rules exist for a reason," others with banners that said, "Naomi is a hero." The crowd was split. So was the country. Inside the conference room, a podium had been set up in front of a wall bearing the hospital's insignia and the Reed Technologies logo. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, most already filled with media representatives. Cameras were positioned at every angle. Alexander arrived moments before the event began. He wore a charcoal suit, a subdued tie, and a face that revealed nothing. Naomi stood beside him, clutching a folded piece of paper in her hand. Her palms were damp. "You don't have to speak," Alexander said quietly. "I can handle this." Naomi nodded, then shook her head. "No, I need to." When the event began, Alexander stepped to the microphone first. The cameras flashed. The room fell into hushed attention. Yesterday, he began, my son nearly died. And the only reason he's alive today is because a woman broke every rule she was told to follow in order to save him. He paused. I built my company on systems, protocols, predictability. But none of that saved Liam. Naomi Brooks did. He stepped aside. Naomi approached the microphone slowly. The noise in the room died completely. She unfolded the paper in her hand, but didn't look at it. My name is Naomi Brooks, she said, voice steady. I've been a caregiver for most of my life. It's not just a job. It's who I am. Years ago, I was training to be a nurse, but one moment changed everything. I was blamed for something I didn't do. I lost my license, my career, my name. She looked out over the crowd, but I never stopped caring. A few reporters lowered their cameras. Yesterday, I didn't act out of rebellion or recklessness. I acted because a child was dying. And if that means breaking a rule or taking a risk, then I'll do it every time. She paused, voice catching just slightly. I'm not a hero. I'm not perfect. I just refused to stand still when someone needed help. The applause started slowly, then grew. Later that day, the press conference footage would go viral. Commentators would call it one of the most authentic public statements in years. Talk shows would debate it. Online platforms would dissect every word. But in that moment, as the room rose to its feet, Naomi didn't feel vindicated. She felt seen, not as a criminal, not as a servant, but as a person. And somewhere deep inside her, something long buried began to stir. Not just relief, not just pride, but the quiet, steady hum of possibility. That night, the city breathed differently. The headlines were everywhere, on television, in newspapers, and across every corner of the internet. Naomi Brooks speaks, the woman who saved the Reed legacy. Clips of her speech were replayed endlessly on news networks, each version accompanied by panels of pundits debating what her actions meant for personal responsibility, class dynamics, and the invisible labor behind America's wealth. But inside the quiet guest room of the Reed estate, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, phone off, TV silent. She didn't need to hear it again. She had said what she needed to say, and yet, the world outside hadn't quite decided what to do with her. She could feel it, this tension that came with public opinion balancing on a knife's edge. There were still people who thought she should be in jail. Others called her the embodiment of moral courage. Some thought both were true. The line between criminal and hero had never been thinner. The door knocked softly. Naomi stood, opened it. Alexander was there, holding 2 mugs of tea. You looked like you needed a break from the cameras, he said. Naomi nodded, stepped aside. They sat in silence for a moment, each sipping slowly. Alexander stared out the large window facing the lake. Naomi studied him from the side. He looked tired, but not in the way he had before. Not the exhaustion of overwork or decision fatigue. This was something deeper, heavier. Do you ever feel like you're trapped in a version of yourself you didn't choose? He asked quietly. Naomi blinked. All the time. Alexander let out a dry laugh. I spent most of my life building systems to control chaos. I thought that was the key. Minimize the variables, manage the people, measure the outcomes. And then one moment. One person breaks every rule and saves my son. Naomi said nothing. He turned to her. Why didn't you tell me about your past? The nursing? She hesitated. Would you have hired me if I had? Alexander didn't answer, but his silence said enough. Naomi continued. It follows me, that story. People assume if you've been dismissed from a hospital, it must be because you did something wrong. They don't want to know the context, just the label. I get it, Alexander said. People only see the headline. They sat in silence again. Then Alexander leaned forward. I've been thinking a lot about what happens next. For you. For Liam. For this household. Naomi stiffened. She wasn't sure if this was a prelude to gratitude or goodbye. I want to offer you a formal position, he said. Not just as Liam's caregiver, but as director of a new program I'm building, the Naomi Initiative. We'll provide emergency response training for domestic staff, caregivers, and household workers across the country. You'll oversee it. Shape the curriculum. Speak on its behalf. Naomi stared at him. I don't have the credentials anymore. You have something better, he said. You have lived experience. And now, you have a platform. She shook her head slightly, unsure. I'm not used to being in the spotlight. You didn't ask for it, he said. But that doesn't mean you can't use it. Naomi let the words settle in the room. A week ago, she had been invisible. She had known the names of every cleaning agent in the house, but not the ones of the board members who shaped Alexander's empire. Now she was being asked to lead something that would carry her name. "I'll need time to think," she said finally. "Take it," he said, finishing his tea. "But know this, Liam has asked for you every day since the hospital. He doesn't see the controversy. He doesn't see the headlines. He just sees the woman who kept him alive." Naomi's throat tightened. Alexander stood to leave. But before he did, he turned back one more time. "I don't say this lightly," he said. "Thank you for not waiting, for not asking permission." Then he left. Naomi remained still for a long time. Later that evening, she crept down the hallway to Liam's room. The door was slightly ajar, soft music playing from a white noise machine. Inside, the boy lay curled up beneath a soft blue blanket, his cheeks pink with returning health, one arm wrapped around a small stuffed dinosaur. Naomi didn't enter. She just stood at the door, watching. Lucas Carter stepped out of a nearby room and paused when he saw her. They locked eyes. He approached slowly. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. Naomi didn't answer. "I judged you," Lucas continued. "I assumed the worst. Because of where you came from, how you looked, your past. I saw you as a risk instead of a person." She still said nothing. "I can't undo that," he admitted. "But I wanted to say it." Naomi finally looked at him. "Then say it to the next woman who walks into this house wearing a uniform. And mean it." Lucas nodded, then walked away. She turned back to Liam's room. The boy stirred in his sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. For a second, Naomi thought he was waking, but then he settled again, breathing softly. She backed away. That night, as she lay in the unfamiliar bed of the guest room, Naomi stared at the ceiling, wide awake. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a different version of her life. One where she was no longer hiding. One where she no longer wore gloves to protect herself from the world. One where she wasn't just reacting to tragedy, but building something because of it. She thought about Milo. She thought about Liam. She thought about the women who cleaned floors in silence, who raised children they didn't give birth to, who disappeared behind the wealth they upheld. And she knew then, whatever came next, she couldn't disappear again. 3 days later, Naomi stood in the center of a large, sunlit conference room on the top floor of Reed Technologies. The windows overlooked the skyline of downtown Austin, the glass catching reflections of morning light and movement below. Cars, pedestrians, a city waking up. But Naomi wasn't looking out the windows. She was looking at the rows of people in front of her. Housekeepers, nannies, elder caregivers, gardeners, private drivers. Nearly 100 of them, all seated in folding chairs, each holding a notepad and a welcome packet embossed with gold lettering. The Naomi Initiative, Emergency Response Training for Domestic Professionals. Alexander Reed sat quietly in the back row, arms folded, observing. There was no podium, no stage. Naomi had insisted on keeping things simple. She took a breath and began. "I know what it's like to feel invisible in a house full of people," she said, her voice steady. "To be trusted with a child's life, but not with a voice in the room. To clean fingerprints from glass, but never leave any of your own." She looked around. "I also know what it feels like to freeze when someone needs help. Not because you don't care, but because you're afraid. Afraid of doing it wrong. Of being blamed. Of being punished for trying." Some heads nodded. Others looked down, their expressions guarded, but their bodies still. Naomi continued. "That fear almost kept me from acting. Years ago it did. A child died because I didn't push past the rules. Because I waited. I won't make that mistake again. And neither should you." The room was silent, heavy with understanding. This program isn't just about CPR or allergy protocols or how to respond when someone collapses. It's about knowing that your presence matters, that your instincts matter, that you matter. She paused, let the words hang. "Welcome," she said. "Let's begin." The room erupted into quiet applause. After the session, Naomi walked the hallways with Ava Tran, now officially the medical advisor for the Naomi Initiative. Ava had agreed to help structure the training modules, contribute her clinical expertise, and ensure the program was medically sound. "You've got a gift," Ava said as they reviewed the feedback forms from the morning session. "You don't just teach. You lead." Naomi smiled faintly. "That still feels strange to hear. But it's true," Ava said. "And people are listening." This matters. Naomi nodded. It did matter. More than she'd anticipated. After the press conference, stories had flooded in, emails, letters, social media messages from domestic workers across the country. One message had come from a woman in Florida who'd performed CPR on a toddler choking on grapes, just 2 weeks after watching Naomi's story. Another from a retired nanny in Chicago who'd always believed real professionals don't listen to the help until she saw Naomi speak. The ripples were spreading. Still, not all reactions were kind. She received hate mail too. You're just lucky the kid lived. You're being used for PR. You broke the law and they made you a saint. Naomi didn't respond to any of it. But she read them. Every one. Because if she was going to stand in the light, she had to understand the shadows that came with it. Later that afternoon, as the building quieted and most of the guests filtered out, Naomi returned to the estate. Liam was home again, fully recovered, his energy back to full speed. She found him in the backyard, chasing butterflies near the garden with a jar in his hand and grass stains on his knees. When he saw her, he ran. Miss Naomi. He leapt into her arms, knocking her slightly off balance. She laughed, holding him tight. I missed you too, sweetheart. He pulled back. Are you going away again? No, she said. Not for a long time. Promise. I promise. They sat together on the garden bench, Liam talking a mile a minute about the new bugs he'd discovered and the games he wanted to play. Naomi listened, smiling, but her eyes kept drifting toward the house, toward the tall windows that had once made her feel watched, even when no one was looking. Now, she felt something different. Not control, not exposure, but clarity. Later that evening, over dinner, Alexander joined them outside. He was more relaxed than Naomi had ever seen him, shirt sleeves rolled up, no phone in sight. Liam, he said as he sat down, I hear you've been catching bugs again. Just butterflies, Liam said proudly. And I'm letting them go after. Very humane of you, Alexander said with a smile. Naomi observed the exchange quietly. Alexander turned to her. You know, the board wants to expand the initiative into a national model. Partner with hospitals, public health offices, even unions. Naomi raised her eyebrows. That fast? He nodded. You started something bigger than a training program. It's a movement now. Naomi looked down at her hands. Bare, open, unhidden. I just wanted people to be prepared, to feel empowered. They do, Alexander said. Because you gave them permission. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment. Then Naomi looked at him. Why me? She asked. There were 100 ways you could have spun this. You could have buried the story, fired me quietly, protected your image. Alexander exhaled slowly. Because I've spent most of my life thinking the right decision was always the most logical one. Numbers, metrics, risk assessments. But you made a decision based on something else. And you were right. Naomi looked away, unsure how to respond. I can't change the system overnight, he said. But I can start by fixing the one I control. She nodded. The moon was rising above the lake, casting silver reflections across the water. Liam had fallen asleep beside her, his head on her lap, his jar of butterflies resting on the grass. Naomi brushed a curl from his forehead, heart steady, breath calm. She had made it through the storm. And now, she was building something new. Not from survival, but from purpose. 2 weeks passed. In that time, the Naomi initiative grew faster than anyone anticipated. What had begun as a single training seminar inside the sleek walls of Reed Technologies was now expanding across multiple states. Pilot programs launched in Atlanta, Denver, and Los Angeles. Ava Tran traveled with Naomi to conduct hands-on workshops. Footage of Naomi teaching CPR to a group of nannies in a community center in Houston made it onto national morning shows. Despite the noise surrounding her, Naomi remained focused. Each city was different. Each room filled with new faces, mostly women, mostly immigrants or women of color, many of them working jobs where their names were forgotten, but their mistakes were never allowed to be. Naomi saw herself in every room, and they saw her not as a celebrity, not as an exception, but as one of their own. Still, with each flight, each camera flash, each time someone asked for her autograph or to take a photo, Naomi felt the pressure growing. Not because she feared the responsibility, but because she feared what would happen if she ever failed again. She had saved a life once. But what if that was all she had in her? What if she couldn't live up to the symbol they'd made her into? It was a question she didn't know how to answer. Back in Austin, things at the Reed estate had changed as well. Lucas Carter, once the silent gatekeeper of the household, had softened visibly. He no longer looked through Naomi as if she were part of the wallpaper. In meetings, he deferred to her when it came to household health protocols. He even recommended the estate staff undergo full emergency training, setting an example for other employers watching the news unfold. Alexander kept his distance most days, though Naomi sensed it wasn't avoidance. It was respect. He no longer saw her as part of the house or part of the staff. He saw her as something else entirely. An equal. A catalyst. One evening, after returning from a 3-day seminar in Atlanta, Naomi entered the estate through the back entrance. She was exhausted. Her shoulders ached. Her voice was hoarse, and all she wanted was to see Liam. But when she stepped inside, the house was eerily quiet. She called out once. No answer. Her heart skipped. She moved quickly through the kitchen, then down the hallway to the library, where she heard voices. She opened the door and froze. Liam was lying on the couch, eyes half open, a cold compress on his forehead. Ava sat beside him, monitoring his vitals. Lucas stood at the doorway, pale. Alexander was pacing in the corner, phone in hand. Naomi stepped inside. What happened? Everyone turned to her at once. He collapsed during dinner, Ava said. His breathing was shallow. Same symptoms as last time. Naomi rushed to his side. Was it something he ate? That's what we're trying to figure out, Alexander said, his voice strained. I had the chef repeat the entire menu. Nothing new. No triggers we know of. Naomi looked down at Liam's face. He was pale, but conscious. His lips moved slightly. Miss Naomi. She held his hand. I'm here, baby. You're okay. We've got you. Ava checked the monitor. His oxygen is stable now. We gave him a new antihistamine from the allergist's list. It seems to be helping. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Was he outside today? Lucas nodded. Only briefly. We had the lawn treated this morning. The gardener used something new, some organic pesticide. Naomi's stomach turned. I need the label. Now. Lucas ran off. 10 minutes later, the answer was clear. The pesticide used, harmless to most, contained a compound derived from an exotic plant extract known to trigger rare allergies. Liam had likely inhaled trace particles. Enough to trigger a reaction, not enough to be immediately obvious. Naomi sat with Liam until his breathing returned to normal. Her hand never left his. She spoke to him gently, keeping his focus, helping him count backward from 20 until he drifted into light sleep. Later, when the crisis had passed, Alexander stood at the hallway window, staring out at the dark lawn. Naomi joined him. He's okay, she said. Alexander nodded. I still on the night. I had protocols in place, he said quietly. I had systems. And again, they weren't enough. Naomi looked at him. That's because care isn't a system. It's a commitment. He turned to her. You always know what to do. She shook her head. No, but I know what not to ignore. He studied her for a long moment, then said, the initiative, it's helping people. But what about you? Who's helping you carry all of this? Naomi hesitated. I don't know, she admitted. Some days it feels like I'm holding a mirror up to everyone else, showing them their blind spots. But I'm still figuring out how to face mine. Alexander said nothing. Then he surprised her. I'm launching a new division at Reed Technologies, he said. A nonprofit, focused on bridging the gaps between tech infrastructure and human care. We'll design systems that support, not replace, the people doing the work. Naomi looked at him, cautious. And you want me involved? I want you to lead it. She laughed softly, not mockingly, but with disbelief. I clean your floors, remember? You used to, he said. Now, you're cleaning the way we think. Naomi looked down at her hands. Still bare. Still unsure. I'm not ready for that. No one ever is, Alexander said. But you're already doing it. They stood in silence a while longer, until Naomi finally asked, what would it even be called? He thought for a moment, then said, the Brooks Project. Naomi didn't answer, but she didn't say no. Later that night, as she stood at Liam's door and listened to his soft breathing, Naomi realized something had shifted, not just in the house, or in the headlines, but within her. She was no longer reacting to emergencies. She was shaping responses. She was no longer part of the background. She was building something, carefully, deliberately, from the ground up. And for the first time in years, she wasn't looking back. By the end of the month, Naomi Brooks had become more than a name. She had become a symbol. National media outlets began to follow her travels with the Naomi Initiative like she was a political figure. Interviews were requested daily. Her speech at the National Caregivers Forum in Denver was broadcast live on 2 major news networks. Articles referred to her as the woman who rewrote the rules of domestic care. But Naomi remained wary of the attention. She had seen how easily stories were twisted. One moment, they lifted you onto a pedestal. The next, they tore you down for standing on it. She didn't want to be famous. She wanted to be useful. Still, she couldn't deny the change. The initiative had taken root. Foundations began to donate. Unions started conversations. Caregivers from across the country wrote to her, not just to say thank you, but to share their stories. Some had similar backgrounds, accused, dismissed, silenced. Others had spent decades in homes where they were invisible until something went wrong. Naomi read each letter carefully. She responded to as many as she could. Meanwhile, back in Austin, the Reed estate had become a quieter place. The media attention had slowed, and the household, once rigid and corporate in its operation, had grown softer around the edges. Liam played freely. The staff smiled more. Lucas even instituted a new protocol where every employee's birthday was recognized and celebrated, a gesture that seemed small but felt like a crack in a once unbreakable wall. One evening, Naomi sat in the estate's garden after a long day of meetings. The sun was setting, painting the lake in shades of gold and amber. Liam sat beside her, coloring dinosaurs in a notebook. Alexander stood nearby, speaking quietly with Lucas about travel plans. A letter sat in Naomi's lap. It had arrived that morning in a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed neatly. Naomi, you may not remember me, but I remember you. My name is Dr. Christine Hale. I was on the review board at St. Clair's Hospital the year you were dismissed. I regret my silence more than you know. I didn't speak up when I should have. I let fear and politics cloud my judgment. But I followed your story, and I want to help now. If you're willing, I'd like to talk. Not for an apology, but to begin something new. Christine Hale. Naomi read the letter twice more before folding it and tucking it back into the envelope. She wasn't sure how to feel. Forgiveness was never something she'd expected, especially not from the people who had watched her fall and said nothing. But here it was. Not absolution, but a step towards something that might one day become it. Later that night, she sat with Ava at a cafe in East Austin, a quiet place they'd started visiting between training sessions. Naomi slid the letter across the table. Ava read it, then looked up. Are you going to meet her? I don't know. What's holding you back? Naomi stirred her tea. I guess I thought I'd buried all of that. And now it's digging itself back up. Ava nodded. Sometimes healing feels more like excavation than recovery. Naomi smiled faintly. Spoken like a nurse. Spoken like a woman who watched another woman drive a Lamborghini through a hospital parking lot and change the world, Ava said. Naomi laughed. A real one this time. They sat in silence for a while. Then Ava added, You don't owe her anything. But maybe you owe something to yourself. Naomi didn't answer right away, but she knew Ava was right. The following week, Naomi flew to New Orleans. It was her first time back since the day she left with a trash bag full of uniforms and a reputation that felt like a stain she'd never scrub away. The city hadn't changed much. The heat still pressed against the skin like a second layer. The air smelled of earth and sea and history. Christine Hale greeted her at a small community clinic downtown. She looked older than Naomi remembered, her hair now streaked with silver, her face lined not just by age but by years of silence. They sat in an office that was modest but clean. On the wall were framed photos of staff, most of them women of color, standing proudly beside patients. This was not a place of judgment. It was a place of service. Christine began. You don't have to be here. I know, Naomi said. Christine nodded. I won't ask you to forgive me, but I want to say that I see now what I refused to see then. You were scapegoated. The system failed you, and I was part of that. Naomi listened quietly. Christine continued. After you left, I stayed. I thought I could fix things from the inside, but I didn't. I just got comfortable. You, on the other hand, you rebuilt everything. From nothing. Naomi spoke at last. I didn't rebuild it for revenge. I did it because I couldn't stand by a second time. I know, Christine said. And that's why I want to help now. Our clinic is launching a new caregiver training program. It's small, but I want it to be part of the Naomi Initiative. Naomi's heart caught in her chest. She hadn't expected that. Christine added, "Let's turn the place that silenced you into a place that amplifies others like you." Naomi didn't say yes, but she didn't say no. As she left the clinic, she passed by a group of nurses in scrubs, chatting in Spanish, their laughter echoing down the hallway. One of them glanced at Naomi, then did a double take. "Are you?" Naomi smiled. "Yeah." The nurse beamed. "Thank you. For everything." Naomi stepped out into the afternoon sun. Her feet were on familiar ground, but her path had changed. She was no longer walking away from a past that had betrayed her. She was walking toward a future she was helping build, with her name, her story, her scars. And this time, everyone would remember. 6 months later, the Naomi Initiative held its first national summit in Washington, D.C. What began as a single, desperate act had become a national movement. The summit was held in a grand, understated conference center overlooking the Potomac River. No red carpets, no glamour, just people, caregivers, domestic workers, nonprofit leaders, policymakers, gathered in one place with a common purpose: to reimagine the value of care. Naomi stood backstage, looking out from behind the curtain as the crowd filtered in. Rows of folding chairs quickly filled with people of every background. Filipino housekeepers from California, Haitian nurses from Miami, single mothers from Detroit who had traveled by bus just to attend. There were no celebrities in attendance, but there were heroes everywhere. Ava approached from behind, holding a clipboard. "Everything's ready. You're up in 10. Naomi took a deep breath. "This still feels unreal." Ava smiled. "That's because most people don't get to live in the legacy they're building." Naomi glanced toward the wings where Alexander was speaking with a group of educators and healthcare leaders. He caught her eye, nodded once. He didn't need to say anything. They both understood what this moment meant. The summit was more than a celebration. It was a formal declaration. Care is not a luxury. It is not an afterthought. It is a human right, and those who provide it deserve to be trained, supported, and seen. When Naomi walked out on stage, the room rose to its feet. The applause wasn't thunderous. It was steady, grounding, full of respect. She stood behind the podium and waited for silence. Then she began. "I used to wear gloves all the time," she said. "Not just because it was part of the job, but because it helped me keep my distance from the people around me, from the mistakes behind me, from the version of myself I thought was broken." She looked around the room. But gloves can't protect you from pain. They can't shield you from memory. They can't stop you from caring. And one day, I had to choose between protecting myself and saving a child's life. A pause. I chose the child. She told the story again, but this time, in her own words, without media edits, without speculation or spin. She spoke not as a symbol, but as a woman who had once been cast aside and who now stood not in defiance, but in purpose. She ended with a message that would later be printed on posters, quoted in magazines, and taught in classrooms. We are not invisible. We are not replaceable. We are not just background noise in someone else's success story. We are caregivers, and we save lives every day, even when no one is watching. When she stepped off stage, Ava was waiting with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. "No," Naomi said softly. "We did." After the summit, Naomi returned to Austin. Life didn't return to normal, but it found a new rhythm. She still worked closely with the initiative, traveling for trainings and overseeing curriculum. But she also gave herself permission to be still, to enjoy moments that weren't shaped by urgency. Afternoons in the garden with Liam. Quiet mornings watching the lake. Dinners shared with Alexander and his staff, not as a housekeeper, not as a guest, but as something that defied the roles they once lived by. One morning, Naomi sat with Liam on the front steps of the estate, helping him with a school project on real-life heroes. He had drawn her. Crayon lines traced the outline of a woman with curly hair, standing beside a bright yellow sports car. Beneath it, in Liam's messy handwriting, were the words, "Miss Naomi." She didn't wait for someone else to be brave. Naomi blinked back tears. Later that week, Alexander approached her in the office they now shared on the estate grounds. It had once been a guest suite. Now it was the headquarters for the Texas branch of the initiative. "There's something you should see," he said. He handed her a document. Official letterhead, stamped and signed. Naomi read it once. Then again. It was an offer from the Department of Health and Human Services, inviting her to consult on a federal task force aimed at developing national emergency training standards for in-home care workers. They want your voice in the room, Alexander said. Naomi exhaled slowly. This isn't just a job offer. No, he agreed. It's a seat at the table. She nodded, setting the paper down. I'll go. That night, Naomi returned home to her own apartment, a modest but warm space just outside the estate grounds. She no longer lived in the staff quarters. She had boundaries now, and balance. She poured herself a cup of tea, opened the sliding door to her balcony, and stepped into the night air. From where she stood, she could see the lights of the city in the distance. For years, she had walked its streets feeling small, ashamed, invisible. Now, she was part of shaping its future. She thought about the many women, some living, some lost, whose hands had scrubbed floors, comforted children, held the weight of households without ever being named. She thought about Milo. She thought about Liam. She thought about herself, not as the woman who had once fled a hospital with her dignity in pieces, but as the woman who had driven through fear and fire to make sure a child lived to see another day. And then she whispered into the quiet, I am not what they tried to erase. The wind rustled gently through the trees. The city below continued to move. Cars, trains, people going about their lives. And in that stillness, in that moment, Naomi Brooks finally understood something deeper than redemption. She had not just saved a life. She had reclaimed her own. And this legacy she was building, would outlive her. Not because she was famous, but because she had dared to care when it mattered most.